Yeah, well, I will take Eric Adams first. I saw him at the Capitol for the swearing in, and I was glad he was there. And you have the mayor of Dallas who switched parties because the Democratic Party has just gone crazy and anti-cop. You have a mayor in Miami who's a Republican, and you have a mayor in New York City who's a strong Democrat, but like he understands his city cannot handle the onslaught of illegal drugs and illegal immigration much longer. So I think it was great he was there. And I think that, we talked a lot about weaponized bureaucracies in Washington, D.C., where I live, and it's our biggest problem. The open border maybe is number one, but right alongside it is this idea that our own government is fighting against us. And I think there's a lot of people inside the Department of Homeland Security along the border that these people actually want to do their job right. And I think Tom Homan, Kristi Noem, they're going to get some real support from these law enforcement folks on the ground who have, it's been a very hard 4 years for the Border Patrol.
I agree. In fact, sadly, we reported on one who lost his life in Vermont on Monday after a traffic stop of an illegal. So there you have it, just how dangerous their roles are. Matt, we're talking about 5 p.m., the deadline today. Federal government has this memo saying all the federal employees who are DEI hires, well, you will be put on administrative leave. How do you think this is being received among the D.C. elite and those who have these jobs that were identity politics, of course?
I think my neighbors are nervous, Bianca. There's a lot of people who work for the federal government making almost $200,000 a year. If you and your spouse each have one of these jobs, you're hauling in a lot of money. And in most cases, they're like maybe three and a half day a week gigs. And a lot of them do a lot of nonsense like DEI, which, as we know, has been used to take merit out of any of the selection processes. Remember, Northern Virginia and the Maryland suburbs used to be swing areas. So those people who worked in the federal government were purple, some were Democrat, some were Republican. These areas now are 100% woke, 99% woke. They voted for that crazy Democratic switcheroo, Kamala Harris, by like 98% in Washington, D.C. So now that means the federal bureaucracies are completely filled with these woke people, and Donald Trump is taking them on. Now, they'll come after him like they did last time, but this time he knows their game.
He does. Speaking of woke, you can't even avoid it. At the pulpit yesterday, that bishop, Marianne Edgar Buddy, criticized today for targeting Trump. Instead of saying a prayer for the country, praying for our leaders, which you think would be the right thing to do. Trump's saying she owes him an apology. But get this, Matt, the story now, of course, developing today because she got an invite from the ladies at The View. I want to play a little bit of what she told them about the hyper-political climate right here. Let's listen.
We have a lot of churches in our particular denomination that are that meet the needs of immigrants and other vulnerable populations, and we need now to be especially mindful and to make sure that basic human rights are protected and people's needs can be met.
What about the basic needs of someone like Laken Riley, murdered by an illegal? And, I know you're a great man of faith, and I'm a big believer in, prayers work. We should be praying for our nation and the leaders who can take us out of this dismal and sad chapter. And fortunately, Donald Trump is here to do that.
By the way, I'm Catholic. You can't get into the Vatican unless you have a pass. You have to pass a big gate, a big wall. These are just the realities of life. You can't get into ABC News or CBS News without being on the list, going through a security guard and getting in. These security precautions are needed in the modern world. In America, it is completely consistent with being a strong Christian or a strong person of faith with having an orderly immigration system where you can't cut in line and get ahead of somebody else and then be somebody who we would never let in and then become a criminal and start to harass Americans. This is insane that this woman is using our savior as a way to push communism, wokeism. That's insane. And she doesn't have compassion for the unborn child. She doesn't have compassion for the legal immigrant who's having trouble economically because the illegal immigrant
migrants
is undercutting them.
Into sex trade?
Exactly. Sex trafficking. I could go on and on and on. And look, this kind of Christianity, this kind of the Christianity that's pushing politics over, the theology of Jesus being our savior I'm just so exhausted of it.